Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth and fancy seeing you here in June. A very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. And welcome to the Mick Minas podcast. And of course, we're going to be talking about the elephant in the room. What? There's no elephant in here? I'll sort that out later on the edit. But anyway, yes, we're going to be talking about the Spider-Man debacle. We're going to be talking about Spider-Man being not part of the MCU any longer. The shock news that we're getting a Matrix 4. We're going to be talking about Krypton's cancellation a little more. And we're going to be talking about Todd Phillips' comments. Todd Phillips, the writer and director of the Joker movie starring Joaquin Phoenix, says originally he didn't foresee making more Joker movies, but now he wants to do more if Joaquin wants to be part of that, because he says, hey, if you're making something great, why not? They can smell the money. They can smell the money. Look, what Todd Phillips and Walter Hamada have done is amazing. You know, you look at Walter Hamada, who is really kind of just shuttling about over at the New Line Cinema division, making great horror franchises. You know, once they got rid of Zack Snyder, they brought Walter Hamada in to utilize and refresh the DC cinematic universe, the DC kind of division of films. He's done a very good job because his plans are very, very smart. This black label that Todd Phillips has come up with is very, very exciting. Also, of course, if you make more Joker movies, you can have an Elseworld of other characters within those other Joker movies as well. So it's very smart. It's very bright. And look, the potential is absolutely limitless. And I think it's amazing. I think with the list of films we've got on this DC movie slate, we should all be really, really excited. If you love DC films and you love the DCEU, I think the worm is turning already. Somehow he managed to get Aquaman to make over $1 billion. Shazam did really well and attracted the family audience and the kids that Hamada wanted to attract. So far, so good. We've got Birds of Prey, we've got Wonder Woman 1984. At this moment in time, everything in the DC movie garden is rosy. And if they announce the Snyder Cut as well, things are going to get even rosier. And this is interesting, isn't it? When we go to the Spider-Man debacle and we look at what's happened. When did the chink first start? When did we start to see the chink in the Kevin Feige MCU armor? Well, I think it was Captain Marvel. If you go back with Disney, the chink in their armor, because they did look bulletproof, even with the Rogue One debacle, which they quickly cleaned up and got themselves out of. It started with The Last Jedi. That was when you realised that Disney are not a big studio. Because you make a movie, right? You decide to buy Lucasfilm. You decide to make Star Wars films. You bring in J.J. Abrams, who does a good job with The Force Awakens, even though some people weren't happy because it was a rip-off of A New Hope. But he kind of had to do it with the hate for the prequels. By the way, I'm a prequel lover, just to say that. But the hate of the prequels, you kind of needed to hark back to what everybody loved. And I think it was good. It made a lot of money. And the big mistake, of course, JJ not writing and directing The Last Jedi and not being in there to see this trilogy through. You bring in someone like Rian Johnson, who has totally different ideas, which, of course, he's allowed to have, but not the ideas that Star Wars fans wanted. An absolute mess. So already, and their reaction to the consumer's reaction wasn't good, calling people, racists and sexists and everything else. You do not attack your consumer, even if you hate them. I used to work on a deli counter in the Co-op supermarket. I used to hate my customers, but I always used to smile. I always used to chat about the football, even though I couldn't stand the fuckers, right? And that's when you're dealing with customers, when you're dealing with the public, yet they can't know that you hate them because you'll drive them away. And this is what Disney are doing. We've seen Solo, a Star Wars story, flop. But I think we all felt, even though they literally killed Star Wars and made Star Wars uninteresting to everyone, they still had the MCU and Feige was doing a good job over there. a good job in terms of what he wanted to do, keep it going with kind of the mediocrity, the kind of the generic way they were making those films. They were very unremarkable films, but they were working because basically, because it's a series of films, and that was a clever idea. You would come back for the next episode if you like. So it was working really well, and I think Captain Marvel really was when you realised that Feige was no longer running things independently, and kind of the bureaucrats at board level at Disney were taking over. You know, getting Brie Larson to say those awful, stupid things during the marketing campaign for Captain Marvel was the most stupidest, illogical, unintelligent thing. Again, you're attacking a portion of your consumer. You want to make money. Now, they claim they made over $1 billion with Captain Marvel, but we also hearing rumours with their theme parks that some figures might not be true. There's some kind of controversy going on with that. Look, Disney were never a big company. They didn't have the experience. Disney basically, right, got Bob Iger in, who was very ambitious and obviously has made them a lot of money. But he's not a filmman. He's a bean counter. He's a bit like Kevin Sujihara. But as I've said before, Bob Iger is like a guy who can't juggle, but somehow he's juggling all the balls in the air, but suddenly they start to fall. And Captain Marvel was when you realised that Kevin Feige was no longer independently in control of the MCU. Even in the early dark days of the MCU, when fans were complaining, they left it. I mean, obviously when Marvel Studios was first formed with the first Iron Man film, Disney weren't there, but they quickly got involved. But they still said, you know what, Kevin, you're doing a great job. We're going to let you get on with it. And they did. They did for most of the movies, and that's why it worked. But I think once with the Captain Marvel thing, they saw this female lead, and they got carried away with themselves, and they marketed her in the wrong way, and they put people's backs up. So that was the first chink in their armour. And I mean, if we go to San Diego Comic-Con, when he kind of unleashed his fillery, boring Phase 4, which has really, if you're a Marvel fan, you can pretend you're excited for it, but there's not much to be excited about. Well, apart from obviously they're doing, I forgot it was even called now, and they're redoing that Wesley Snipes one, right? And obviously you've got other things as well, but mostly it's Doctor Strange. That's what I was thinking of. God, I'm losing my memory today. It's all the excitement with everything that's going on in the entertainment industry. But yeah, Doctor Strange kind of interests me. I love Benny Cumberbatch. I think he's a great actor. He's a great Doctor Strange. That kind of interests me. But mostly, Phase 4 isn't very interesting. And when he was questioned about Phase 4, he seemed very defensive with one journalist. And I started then again to see, we'd already seen a chink in the MCU armour and the Disney armour before that with The Last Jedi. But when he started, because he's always been calm, he's always been composed, he's always been able to utilise the consumer and the fans and get them excited. But I think it's very difficult to get people excited for Love and Thunder. You know, it isn't exciting, and it's a political move. That film is down to the bureaucrats at Disney. Just like Warner Brothers were interfering with Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad and Justice League, they've started to make the same mistakes. But it's interesting, because as I talk about Disney being a small company, because basically they were a company who used to make cutesy animated movies. Even when they got a bit ambitious with Pixar, that's what they were doing. But all of a sudden, they bought Marvel Studios, Lucasfilm, and they were making the money of a big company, but they didn't have the mentality of a big company. Let me explain to you, with all the kind of bad press that Warner Brothers gets, they always know how to unravel themselves out of a comfortable situation. Just before Man of Steel was announced, they were fighting the Schuster and the Sequoias for rights of movie rights for Superman. And everyone said they're going to lose it. I knew they weren't going to lose it, because they know how to get themselves out of a tight corner. And they did. And they did it with style. And then you've got what happened with Justice League and the firing of Zack Snyder and the reshoots and everything that went wrong with that film. I think that would have broke most studios. Most studios would have had to have cancelled the DCEU, not them. They went to New Line Cinema, their own company. They knew that Walter Hamada is a genius and he knows how to work these things. They brought him in and look what he's done. Look what he's achieving already very quietly. And it's interesting, isn't it? Walter Hamada doesn't stand behind a podium and get everyone rolled up and excited. He's too busy developing this DC Films franchise, and he's doing a very, very good job. And it's just going to get better and better. But over at Disney now, it's becoming very, very uncomfortable. And it seems to me that Disney and Kevin Feige are gambling everything on X-Men. They're gambling everything on the Fox properties they now own. And it's kind of, well, we're going to walk away from Spider-Man. You're not going to give us what we want. That's crazy. Spider-Man is Marvel's #1 most famous character around the world, and you're not going to have access to him anymore. It's bad enough they don't own the property. Someone, an MCU stan said, oh, well, they'll just have to buy Sony. They can't. Sony's too big. Even when Sony struggled, the Sony division, and not just the studios, is massive. And it's very, very difficult to buy them out. And so instead, they're trying to reutilize their own kind of franchises because they've got their own Marvel properties, Spider-Man, Morbius, Venom. They've already done one Venom movie that made around 800 million. Still very good. People said that Venom didn't do well. Venom did do well. It might not have been a perfect movie, but I tell you what, with the guy they've got in now to direct the sequel, it's very, very exciting. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, again, very, very exciting. They're moving in the right direction. And I mean, you've got to give their people credit for the press release they gave about Spider-Man not being in the MCU anymore. They came out and said a lot of the stuff that's being said is wrong. Of course, it's not wrong. They parted ways because Disney wanted a 50-50 cut from Spider-Man movies, and they said no. They offered them about 10%, and that wasn't good enough for them. Again, as I said earlier, I kind of understand both companies' kind of attitudes here. Disney and Marvel Studios are doing all the legwork here. It's because of them Spider-Man Far From Home made so much money, and they want more of the profits, and you can understand that. But Sony, as a company who owns the rights, can say, do you know what? No, we want to make more. The reason we came to you was to make more money, 3/4 of this money, because we know you can bring in big box office. But Disney is saying, well, hang on a minute. We know we want Spider-Man because he can bring in a lot of money. And in the end, they couldn't come to an arrangement, and it's over. And I mean, they come up with this ridiculous press release. And, it is a ridiculous press release where they say, oh, Kevin's too busy to keep on working on Spider-Man. Too busy to work on the biggest, most popular character in Marvel Comics. I tell you what, Stan Lee must be twisting and turning in his grave. It's absolutely ridiculous. And people are waiting for Disney to have a response. Disney don't have to have a response because basically Spider-Man isn't their character. So the only people who are required to make an announcement for business reasons is Sony, and they've made that. And they've come up with a cock and bull story that Kevin Feige is too busy. It's not just about Kevin Feige helping to develop these films. It's about Marvel Studios being involved. And it's about this character being involved in the MCU, and he's not anymore. And that's the point. That's the point. And a lot of people are going to be upset. Now, I've heard nonsense about, protesting against Sony not buying the PS5. It's all absolute nonsense. Never going to happen. Even if I love the MCU to bits, even though if I love this version of Spider-Man, which I don't, he's such a watered-down version. It's absolutely terrible. I loved him in Civil War. I thought that was a great start. The only good thing Feige did was casting Tom Holland. Now, from their press release, which I read on another video earlier, it seems to me that they're going to continue with Tom Holland and what's already been built up and created. Whether John Watts is it John Watts who directed the other movie, will carry on with it? That's another case in point. But who knows? They could recast a lot, including Tom Holland. Everything is up for grabs now. But it's a very unsavoury business. It hasn't been handled well at all. It's really leaked out, and I think it's, if we move on to my next subject, which is the Matrix 4, I think Warner Brothers must have known that this Spider-Man news was coming out, and they released it under exactly the right time. And this is Anna Sarnoff for you. You know, Anna Sarnoff's not been at Warner Brothers 5 minutes. I assume this decision for Matrix 4 was already into the plans, but you know, she's been here for only 5 minutes, and already she's making positive waves. And I'm, of course, very excited. Of course, we live in an era now where Hollywood isn't very original, and there is a lack of originality. But I'm hoping that Warner Brothers start to develop more original films with Ann Sarnoff running things as well. And I think that will be part of it, as well as the DC films, as well as, I'm assuming, Matrix 4 will only be the beginning. If it's successful, it's going to be very, very interesting. With is it Lana Wazowski who's going to be doing it? So I tell you what, wouldn't it be interesting? I mean, they're saying that Lana Wazowski is going to write and direct it, and I know that Wazowski's always kind of write and direct their own movies, but wouldn't it be kind of interesting if they got Zack Snyder to direct this movie? Zack Snyder, and the way he choreographs and makes films look, is perfect for a Matrix movie. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you know, it would be very, very interesting. And I mean, I want to see the Snyder Cut, by the way, but this would kind of dumb down calls for the Snyder Cut a bit if Zack Snyder was given this job. Anyway, I haven't heard anything. I don't know that's going to happen. But that will be an interesting development. As I say, Keanu Reeves actually turned down Kevin Feige to have a role within the MCU. I'm assuming this is why. I think Warner Brothers would have been desperate for Keanu not to be involved with Disney in the MCU. He was already involved with Toy Story 4, and I think they could see the danger signs there, and I think they kind of utilised him very, very quickly. And it wouldn't surprise me if he also reprises his role as Constantine as well. I think he's definitely going to be making a lot of things with Warner Brothers now. And this is another problem Kevin Feige's got now, because a lot of people are seeing Disney for what they are. And people will be choosing Warner Brothers over Disney. Kind of, people can see what Disney are now. They're a cash cow, but they don't make good quality films. Films that you can watch again and again. And that really, really is the problem. So I'm really, really excited about The Matrix 4. I think it's going to be a great film, and bring it on. And really, with Keanu being popular again and getting all this work again, it's a very, very exciting time to be a movie fan. So last week we heard that Krypton was cancelled. I was talking with the co-showrunner, Cam, and he is kind of fighting to try and find Krypton a new home, because he even said it on one of his posts. So that's interesting. I think he will find a new home for it, fingers crossed, because that show deserves to still be on the TV. So hashtag save Krypton, and let's get that moving. Yes, so just going back to what I was talking about on the top of the show, and that's Todd Phillips talking about a Joker movie sequel. None of us saw this coming, but I think they're kind of looking at it now, and maybe they had plans for it. Maybe they were just saying that it was a one-off. I did kind of suspect, and it'll be interesting what Batman, because eventually, if this continues, I know that Bruce Wayne is really a young boy, but they can time jump and stuff. And it will be interesting in the sequel if we get an adult Batman. And who will that be? These are questions that will have to be answered, of course. And, of course, you all want to go and see the first Joker movie, which I've had the privilege to see. And, you know, this is film from what we grew up with. This film is in my top 10 favourites of all time. It is something very special, and you haven't seen half of it in that teaser trailer. There's going to be another trailer at the end of this month, I think August the 30th, but basically this is about a man who's beaten and battered and treated badly, a man suffering with mental health issues, who is broken and battered so much he gets broken psychologically, and he starts a revolution against society. And it's a very interesting film. And as Todd Phillips says, I'm not saying start a revolution. I'm just showing you that what can happen when you treat people badly, and you treat people you don't want to see in society badly. Look what happens. They rise up against you. And it happens in real life all the time. So as far as I'm concerned, DC films are going in the right direction. So what do you think about this Spider-Man fallout? It's amazing, isn't it? Really? And I mean, it is funny how Disney fans are still blaming Sony when it's pretty obvious it was Disney who walked away from this agreement, this arrangement. And as I also said, Feige and Disney are kind of taking a gamble on Fantastic Four and X-Men. Will it work? There'll be a great deal of interest in Fantastic Four and X-Men. But in terms of developing Spider-Man, it didn't work for me. It didn't work for me. Very boring, very uninteresting. It wasn't the Tobey Maguire, it wasn't the Raimi era. A lot of people do like The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Again, that wasn't for me. I think Raimi has been the only one to make two awesome, epic Spider-Man movies. And a lot of people are kind of thinking about a Spider-Man 4 directed by Sam Raimi. That would be really special. So please like, share and subscribe and keep on commenting down below.